Hello everyone, my name is Niyaz Mahdavi, and you are listening to the Young Minds Magnified podcast. As I have mentioned before, my main goal for creating this podcast was to be able to allow teenagers to share their experiences on how different situations affect them mentally. The topic of this episode in particular is something I know a lot of teenagers deal with subconsciously. I have dealt with this myself, and I know that a lot of others have as well. And so I think that this topic in particular is very important and is necessary to be talked about. The topic of this episode is why do teenagers feel insecure and how common is this problem? I did some research beforehand to familiarize myself to the situation more, and I found out that during teenage years especially is when a person experiences the most self-doubt. It is a known fact that teenage years, especially the process of going through puberty, is when the person becomes more mature, and it's the time period that the person goes through the most changes to become who they are. And the fact that the person experiences self-doubt shows how much the person is maturing, and during this time period especially is when they try to understand themselves better. Such self-doubt can vary from person to person, though this problem is very common and occurs basically to every teenager. Teenagers' minds are known for being very sensitive, therefore such self-doubt and pinpointing the tiniest of issues in themselves can turn into very big problems and can affect them very badly. Oftentimes you may see the teenager compare themselves, criticize themselves very harshly, and them feeling worthless and as if they are not good enough. And this type of thinking and mindset, low self-esteem, you may say, can develop into self-harm and many different disorders, such as eating disorders, if the insecurity is related to body image, of course. This is an example. Therefore, I think that it is so important to talk about this issue in particular, since to an extent, as I have mentioned before, it affects every single teenager in a different way and to different extents. Even the slightest bit of self-doubt can cause major negative effects to some teenagers' mental health. It is necessary to show that this is a common problem and that there are ways to cope with it. In this episode, we will be having a guest, a student who is also of the European School, who will be sharing their experience related to this topic. Here is my interview with Tika Getiashvili. Hello, first of all, I would like to ask you, how are you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, hello. Well, school is kind of stressful right now, but I'm doing good. Thank you for asking me, and I hope you're doing good too.
Thank you, I'm doing great as well. School has been pretty stressful for me as well, though I am trying to manage. And yeah, I would like to ask you if it is possible for you to introduce yourself a little bit for the listeners, since obviously I know you since we go to the same school, but the listeners do not.
Yes, I can introduce myself. So, my name is Tika, and I'm in DP Year 1.
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to start by asking the first question. As you know, being insecure is a very common problem among teenagers, and I was going to ask, have you ever been insecure about anything, and has it ever affected you mentally in any type of way?
I think everyone has insecurities because when it comes to ourselves, we are more harsh and more critical. In my life, I have been insecure about some things, and I'm still insecure about some things, but it affected my mental health only in the past. I had social anxiety because of it.
What do you think is the main causing factor that made you feel this way? From personal experience, I know that there can be a lot of reasons as of why us teenagers experience feeling insecure. Though, if you were to choose one, what do you think would be the main one?
Yes, there are a lot of reasons and factors why someone has insecurities, but in this century and in our age, I think the main one I would like to point out is social media. The reason behind it is because social media has some kind of influencers and some kind of ads that can really influence us.
I definitely agree. As you mentioned, during this era, this is probably the where most teenagers see others and start comparing themselves and believing in unrealistic standards. And since you mentioned you have felt and experienced feeling insecure. And so I was going to ask if you have ever had a specific moment or concrete memory where you remember being affected by this issue very much. And is it possible for you to describe this moment?
I don't have exact memory, but I remember I realized it's a big issue when these insecurities started to affect my relationship with my friends or my performance in the school. This helped me to realize how this really affected me and how big of an issue it is.
What were some ways you coped with this issue? I know it can be very difficult to do so, but since you said that this was in the past and you have had experience and have gotten better at doing so, I was wondering if there are any specific things you used to do that will help you in case of feeling insecure.
First, I think we should find the roots of our insecurities and where do they come from. In my case, it was following some of the influencers and they were not really healthy for me. So after finding that out, I decided to unfollow them and rather follow the pages that embrace those insecurities that were not really insecurities.
Finally, I would like to ask, are there any suggestions you would be giving to anyone who is experiencing a similar issue? And what would you suggest for them to do in this case?
From my experience, if they're struggling with the same thing I did, which is being insecure about your body, I would suggest them to love their body because that's the only body you get. And the best thing you can do to it is to treat it with kindness and love it because that body helps you to experience the most wonderful things in your life. And I also suggest you to have a confidence.
Thank you very much for sparing your time. I know school can be very hectic, especially now. Therefore, thank you. And once again, thank you for sharing your experience.
I want to thank you, Niyaz, for this. I think it's really great projects that you're doing, and I wish you the luck and to end up with the product you want to. Love you.
Thank you for listening to the Young Minds Magnified podcast. I would like to thank this episode's guest, Tika Getiashvili, for sharing her experience related to this topic. If you would like to listen to more episodes discussing similar topics, you may check out our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, both Young Minds Magnified. Thank you for listening.